Well, good morning. Good morning. We do have a room full this morning, don't we? My name is David Mahfood. Full disclosure, Emily is my niece. I think that's not how I got the job, though, so I think we're all right. Welcome this morning to our class. The title of our class, as you can see on the screen, 7 Ready Responses to the Objections of Unbelievers. You'll do well just to call it apologetics. We're going to talk more about the title and what we're going to do with that as we go along. This is going to be a course in basic to intermediate Christian apologetics. So if you've never had any apologetics training before or ever gone into the field, this will be good for you. This will be a good entry level, but if you've been exposed to a little bit, you're not going to be stuck back at Apologetics 101. We'll be moving kind of quickly. My qualifications, a lot of people want to know this to teach this course. I hold a Master's of Divinity from Southwestern that I earned in 2009. I've been in the ministry for 15 years. For the past 10 years, I've been the senior pastor of Thailand Baptist Church. And we're over on the north side of town. How many of you know where that is, Thailand Baptist Church? All right. We're the one that has to, apparently by church constitution, we have to burn down every 25 years. And so, and we just completed our most recent burning down to the ground in 2010. Counting Thailand and other places in Texas and around the country, I have prepped and preached probably over 1,000 sermons. I was counting the other day. And I've taught and lectured on theology from everything from high school level to the college level before. So this is not my first time in the classroom. I've taught apologetics before to youth, and I've taught them to median adult ages. I also lecture out at YWAM once a year. They have me back, and I don't know why they keep having me back, but they do. This is my 4th full course here at Seminary. Previously, I've taught Colossians. We did an exposition of the Psalms, and then most recently, we did an exposition of Romans. How many of you have survived Romans with me? Raise your hand. All right, and you still look unscathed relatively, so I think that's going to bode well. I was raised Roman Catholic. I came to Christ at the age of 33, and I was called in vocational ministry. I surrendered at the age of 39. That is going to make me what's called an adult convert. And as an adult convert with the background that I have, I approach things from a little bit different angle than you might be used to hearing. And that fact, given the nature of the material that we're going to cover sometime between now and the end of the 5 weeks, you're going to wonder, is this guy really a pastor? I promise you I am, all right? But the field of apologetics lends itself away from the devotional sometimes. I'm going to be teaching you critical and strategic thinking. I'm not going to have as many devotional aspects as you would normally encounter. There are some harder edges to the field of apologetics, but that just goes to what we're trying to accomplish. We'll talk more about that as we go along too. I want to talk to you about just some general course information as we get started. We have exactly 10 hours together in here, and that is minus the breaks. So those breaks that Susan was talking about, I would love to get in and out of those as quickly and cleanly as possible so we can maximize the time. I don't think there's ever been a professor anywhere that says we have an abundance of time and not much material, right? This is, okay. We have a lot to cover in a real short time to cover it. I go fast when I get going. If you've had me before, you will testify to that. I am planning to teach you just above the undergraduate level in college, but maybe just below the graduate level. So somewhere in between there. And that means I'm going to go really, really fast at times. Questions are good. I like questions. They help me learn, they help you learn. If your question, if you can, try to keep it in the flow of what we're covering, okay? And try to keep it on topic. If you don't feel that's the right time, jot it down and ask me at the break or ask me after class. I'm more than happy to answer questions then. If you think it is going to be too long or too involved of a question, email me. Okay? My email, my contact information is in the syllabus. My phone number's in the syllabus too. Don't call me, okay? And I'm going to tell you why. Because I don't know who's calling, and I get calls. Yeah, so you have to leave a voicemail for me to call you back. Just text me or shoot me an email on that. But you will never, ever be pestering me or bothering me with your questions. This is what I do for a living. I answer questions. It is though God said he's not able to do anything else. Let's put him on this. All right? And so that's what I do. Plus, I really enjoy doing it. take your syllabus in hand, if you will. I want to kind of go over some points on that as we get going as well. Everybody have a syllabus. Who needs one? Okay. Under your course description, this is what you'll read. This class will prepare you to confidently and competently defend the Christian faith by giving you the tools and resources to make such a defense and the foundation necessary upon which to do so, which sounds really lofty, doesn't it? The title of the class is the 7 Ready Responses. We're going to actually expand that and go a little bit different direction. We're going to be talking over the next few weeks in terms of 7 areas of response. If you look just right down here, starting with the first hour of next week, we're going to be talking about what I have as divine objections. This is where we're going to deal with issues like the reality of God, when people question the existence of God. We're going to talk about the character of God, all of those God questions. If God really is loving and kind, then why is there suffering and pain in the world? We're going to attack that next week, and we're going to talk about divine objections. The second hour next week, we'll be talking about biblical objections. This is where we're going to focus on the authenticity and the accuracy of Scripture. That's going to require us to know a little bit about the historicity and the veracity of Scripture. We'll get into all of that in the second hour next week. The third area that we're going to be covering is Christological objections. This is going to be dealing with the divinity of Christ and what we call the doctrine of Christian exclusivity, which is that Jesus is the only way to God. We're going to talk about how to present that and what that means and how we can defend it. Tied to that, to the Christological objections, are going to be resurrection objections. It is its own subset. Why do you think it might be its own subset?
Because the people believe that Jesus is the way, they don't believe that.
And if I'm an opponent of the Christian faith, if I can poke holes in the resurrection, then we're done, right? So resurrection objections and resurrection apologetics are going to be its own subset. We're going to be cramming an awful lot into that area as well. We're going to move on from there to philosophical objections. This is going to capture all the things where people go, well, people are basically good, aren't they? And, well, there's an impossibility of certainty in it. We're gonna destroy all of that as well. Intellectual objections. This is where we're going to find the creation issues. When people go, well, evolution and science say this. Again, like the resurrection objections, if I can undermine the doctrines surrounding creation, then I've shot you in the foot before you start. There's no point to go past that. So we're going to focus real heavily on those. And then the last objection area, it's going to be the general objections, the ones that you hear all the time, well, Christians are hypocrites. And just a grab bag of things are all going to be kind of crammed into there. From these 7 areas are where you're going to be able to draw your responses. I want to teach you, as I said before, to think strategically and to think critically and analytically. I want to show you how to arrive at the conclusions rather than simply make the conclusions for you. I'll give you a very bad analogy. I'm going to teach you how to use the weapon. I'm going to show you where we keep the ammo. How you choose to use the weapon, what you aim at, is going to be up to you. Okay? That sounds cold, doesn't it? But remember, we are not talking in terms of aggression or offense. We are talking in terms of defense. Have you ever taken a self-defense class? Who has taken a self-defense class? Raise your hand. All right. Any class in self-defense that you take, the first thing that they're going to tell you is that there are varying degrees of response based on the situation and based on the threat level. In other words, we don't want to be like this.
Hey, can you tell me?
Don't be that person. In self-defense, they will tell you have options, right? You can run away, you can use your voice to deter the attacker, you can kick them in the shins, or you can gouge them in the eyes, or you can empty your pepper spray and then tase them. My point being, Just like in self-defense, there are varying degrees of response in faith defense as well. There are guidelines in place for this, and they will be found in the scripture. We'll get to those here in just a little bit. But I'll submit this to you, and I hope you take this to heart. Faith defense is more important than self-defense. If you don't believe that, look up Stephen, the first martyr. Look up Peter, Andrew, James. Thumb through Fox's Book of Martyrs. Think about the thousands and thousands of people who have made the ultimate sacrifice rather than dispute the truth of the resurrection. When we practice apologetics, we stand on their shoulders. So no one is asking you to sacrifice your life. Not yet, anyway. But in light of what these, including Christ himself, have given, it is not unreasonable that every single Christian should, as Peter says, always be ready to give a defense to everyone who asks. We'll talk more about that later also. In the 10th hour, the final hour that we're in here, we're going to be talking about what I call practical apologetics. I'm going to give you some ways to hone your skills. I'm going to run you through some scenarios. I even have a surprise or two planned for you in the 10th hour, once I get it approved by Emily and Susan, of course. So here's what you're going to need for this course. You're going to need a Bible, any translational work. Now, my exposition classes, that's not the case. But whatever you got on you, that'll do just fine. As I mentioned before, if you've had me in the past, you're going to have much less scripture than we normally do in one of my classes. You're going to need something to take notes on and take notes with. This can be a laptop. This can be a pad. You could be old school. Write it down. I personally learn when I write stuff down. And there is just the off chance that in the next 10 hours, I might just say something that you want to write down. So you might want to have a pen and pad to do that. Our text, the recommended text, is The 10 Most Common Objections to Christianity. It's by Alex McFarland. This is a serviceable book. It will do for you. It's good. If you look over the syllabus, we kind of use some of his stuff. I pull some of his objections in to make up the framework, but whereas he cites 10 objections probably over the course of the 7 areas, we're going to layer probably another 10 or 15 in on top of that. So we're going to use some of his, we're going to use some from other places, and that's why I've grouped them into areas as opposed to specific objections. Yes, ma'am?
That book can be ordered with a click on our website.
Good to know. All right, so you can order it with a click on the Luminary website. Fabulous. To that end, take your bibliography that you have. What I've done for you here is I've assembled either some books that I have read or that I've used in creating this course for you. If you'll see the asterisk next to some of the titles, these are the ones that I would highly recommend. So if you were going to be building a library, if you wanted to start building an apologetics part of your library, these are the ones that I would start with, would be the ones that have the asterisk next to them. The Bickle and Jan's Evidence for Faith 101, this is a very super easy read, really good entry-level book. So if you've never been exposed to anything in the field of apologetics, that's a really good one to start with. Norman Geisler, When Skeptics Ask. Norman Geisler may be the smartest human being walking around on the planet right now, as far as I know. That's a great book to have in your library. The Embarrassed Believer by Hugh Hewitt. This is a really tiny book, but it is a life changer. It is hard to find. It's been out of print for a while. You can probably find it on eBay or on Amazon, but it's worth it. If you remember a few years back, PBS did a special called Searching for God in America, and he was the producer and the narrator on that. It is an amazing book, and I really urge everybody to get it. New Evidence That Demands a Verdict, Josh McDowell. This is a big book, and this is an expensive book. If I were teaching this particular class over a 13-week period at a seminary, that would be, and I didn't care how much you had to pay for the textbook, that would be the textbook that would be my required text, would be New Evidence That Demands a Verdict. I will draw heavily from that in this class. We'll be citing McDowell an awful lot as we go. And then Lee Strobel, The Case for Faith, most people have read that, I'm guessing. It is a little bit of a tougher read than the rest of them, totally worth the time. And then, of course, I have to mention Mere Christianity that did not make it onto here. It is my personal opinion that upon salvation, everyone should be given a Bible and a copy of Mere Christianity. But that's just my opinion, and the church has not enacted that to this point. Okay? At the bottom, you'll see some websites. These are 4 really good websites to start with. carm.org. That's going to be the big kahuna for apologetics. And we'll talk more about that in the last class hour. But any of these are really good. The CARM's a very good one. If you need a quick answer, that's the one I would go to. Okay? So here's what I'd like you to do. I'd like you to do a couple of things. I'd like you, if you have the book, the McFarland book, go ahead and read that as soon as you can. I'm not going to have a signed reading on it, this chapter by this week. Knock it out this week. It's not that difficult, okay? And let's just get that under your belt so we can go on and we can talk about stuff. I'm not really going to be referring back to him much, but it's a good companion book. Also, in the Dropbox preliminary, if you don't have access to it, I'm sure Emily can hook you up with that. I have put over an article, and it's a white paper by Norman Geisler. It's 19 pages, but it's called Beware of Philosophy, A Warning to Biblical Scholars. There's a PDF of that on the website. Download that and read it for a couple of reasons. That is going to show you how the big boys think in terms of apologetics. But also, yes, ma'am.
Can you repeat that title?
Sure. It's the only article over there in week 1. Yeah, it's a PDF, but it's Beware of Philosophy, A Warning to Biblical Scholars. In 2001, I was teaching a median adult class, about 30 to 35 people. And it was around Easter time. And in the weeks prior, we had been doing what's called a compilation study, a compilation look at the events of Passion Week. This is probably not anything you've never done before in your church life. You start with Palm Sunday, triumphal entry, you make your way to Easter morning, the empty tomb, okay? This study that I was engaged in 2001 was everything you'd expect, nothing you would not expect. Okay? No new information being presented in this. It was really a reframing and a recasting of the information and the text that most median adults already know. Right? And I thought it was a really nice study. I thought it was a very lovely study. The goal of the study was almost exclusively devotional, to deepen the believer's appreciation for the work of Christ, to help us try to live more like Christ, a Christ-like walk, just all the standard issue stuff. Nice study, not a thing in the world wrong with it. But it's also nothing that if I had told you, sit down and give me a sketch out of what you think a 4 or 5 week study on Easter would look like, you'd all have come up with basically the same thing. So good, but nothing special. One of my students, this guy, late 30s, early 40s, after class he comes up to me and he's got this real sad look on his face and his eyes are red and it's obvious he's been crying. Now, full disclosure, he was kind of an Eeyore type of guy anyway, so he was always kind of like this, so that wasn't much, but he's teared up and he's looking at me, and of course my vanity, I'm thinking, I have reached this man, I have brought him to tears with my wonderful retelling of the Easter story. And I'm expecting to hear pretty much that from him. But this is what he says, and I'll never forget this. He says, this was great and all. He says, but my boss says the Bible is just a bunch of fairy tales that people used to sit around and tell by the fire. He says, what do I say to that? And he started crying even more. And the pain in his eyes was very real. And I thought, here we are. We are filling this guy with these amazing truths on Sunday that he has no idea what to do with in the world on Monday. Not a clue. There is a disconnect in this guy and countless others like him. There's a chasm that is opening up that this poor guy keeps falling into week after week after week. And we wonder why we're not making any progress in evangelism. And we wonder why we're not making any progress in discipleship. And we sit back and we wonder, we have the audacity to wonder why the church is not making more of an impact on the world. It's because we encase this guy and people like him in this cocoon for an hour or two a week, and then we send him out to take his licks into the world for the next 40 hours.